See, for the last couple of months, I've seen some of my favorite manga IP of all time either coming to an end or skidding to an end. That doesn't mean that 2024 hasn't been one of the greatest years in manga history. See, because while yes, with 2024, we got the ending of MHA, which some people disliked, but most people enjoyed. We're now 2 chapters away from the ending of JJK, which most people dislike, but 2024 could also see the creation of Jujutsu Kaisen. On top of that, this year saw rises in prominence to manga like Kaiji No. 8, Dandadan, and even more obscure manga like Gachi Akuda. And therefore, I would reckon to say that more good happened than bad in 2024 when it comes down to manga. And a big, and I mean big part of that scale being tipped towards the good has been Chainsaw Man. See, while I don't think there's any real denying that part 2 of Chainsaw Man is not as good as part 1 of Chainsaw Man, that might have just been because we hadn't seen the end of part 2 yet. Because as everything currently stands in the manga world right now, there's nothing that I look more forward to reading every single week than Chainsaw Man. I look more forward to reading Chainsaw Man than I do Boruto, and that's saying something. And a lot of that hype is because of characters like Asa and Yoru and Naota and all of their connections to Denji. And it feels as though it has been a somewhat slow burn, we've been building up towards the moment we're now currently seeing in Chainsaw Man for like 80 chapters, and it's paying off in all the ways I wanted it to pay off. See, because in this chapter, we're finally getting to see the War Devil at its full strength versus the Chainsaw Man. And this fight has not only given us a good look into how powerful the War Devil is at full power, but also how powerful the Chainsaw Man is and why it was able to stand toe-to-toe against the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. On top of this most recent chapter, chapter 177, possibly gave us some inroads to better understanding Makima. Yes, Makima's powers. See, because while chapter 177 might have seemed slightly unassuming to the majority of readers, not only did chapter 177 bump up the intensity of the battle between Yoru and Chainsaw Man to 11, but it also provided exposition and possibly set the grounds for what could be one of the craziest reveals in Chainsaw Man history. So in actuality, I think chapter 177 was one of the more important chapters we've ever gotten in Chainsaw Man. And it all revolves around the greatest country on Earth, the US of A. So whether it's giving exposition on how Yoru's gauntlet works, how they tie back to Makima, what all this has to do with the NRA, and what this battle's conclusion is gonna look like, we got a lot to talk about today. Because today we're talking chapter 177 of Chainsaw Man Explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow the brand new channel that I created with Stephen Heat, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you just want to hear me talk about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So, chapter 177 decided to learn from the mistakes of chapter 277 of JJK by picking right up from the events of the last chapter. No candy shop, no newly introduced faction, just action. And thus chapter 177 starts with Yoru with her gun and tank gauntlets equipped. If you'll remember from chapter 176, the last thing that we saw is that the second that Yoru got her arms back in the form of these gauntlets, she fired a shot into Chainsaw Man's stomach, which not only freed the Mouth Devil, but also blew off Chainsaw Man's right arms. And thus this devastating shot to the stomach restored mouths to the entire world, while also critically injuring the Chainsaw Man. And thus the chapter opens with the Mouth Devil's head skittering across the floor, while the Chainsaw Man loses his guts after the gaping wound inflicted by the gauntlet of Yoru. And that's something interesting, is point at the Chainsaw Man and say, bang. Now the Chainsaw Man, or maybe Denji, both of whom who have seen this technique before in very key and crucial moments, probably remembered how devastating this technique could be, and therefore they decide to block with their 2 remaining left chainsaw arms. However, the force of this technique is still so incredibly powerful, it knocks Chainsaw Man back, flat onto his back, and straight through a building that was behind him. And while that's all well and good and awesome, I mean, it's cool to see that Yoru's on the level of Chainsaw Man and that they're gonna be able to fight equally, the most interesting takeaway from all of this is the fact that Yoru used bang. Now, obviously, that's not the craziest thing of all time, considering the fact that the last chapter ended with her firing some kind of air bullet through Chainsaw Man's stomach. Yoru donning these gauntlets and now being able to fire these air bullets simply by saying bang is eerily reminiscent of Makima. See, because this was the exact same technique that Makima used against things like the Darkness Devil and Power. And for the longest time, we never really had an explanation as to why she was able to do that. See, Makima was the Control Devil, and while a lot of the abilities that she showed didn't really have anything to do with control per se, outside of controlling people and devils that she thought she was better than, it was never really explicitly shown that she had control over the Gun Devil. And this is the Gun Devil we're talking about, not the Tank Devil, because the Gun Devil is the right gauntlet, while the Tank Devil is the left gauntlet. In fact, so far as we've seen, Yoru actually hasn't used the Tank Gauntlet yet. And I have a feeling that the Tank Gauntlet may actually be defensive, while the Gun Gauntlet is going to be offensive. But this means that the Bang ability is an ability specific to the Gun Devil. And while obviously it's not a crazy idea that being able to fire air bullets simply by saying bang would be somehow tied back to the Gun Devil, but this does add a rather interesting dynamic to Makima's battle against the Gun Devil, because the American president sacrifices 1 year of every American's life to send the Gun Devil to go fight Makima. Now, obviously, we don't really get to see this fight. However, we know that the fallout of this fight is Aki 47, as the weakened Gun Devil, after fighting against Makima, is able to take over a corpse, and that corpse is Aki. And then, obviously, after Aki 47 is formed, it goes to Denji's door, and Denji has to dispose of Aki 47. It's then 2 chapters after that Denji and Makima are hanging out, and Makima invites Power over. And it's at this point that we see the first bang from Makima. And this chapter confirms to us that that means that the conclusion of Makima and the Gun Devil's fight led to Makima gaining the Gun Devil's abilities. Because while for a long time I did believe, didn't Makima use Bang in the battle against the Darkness Devil? No, she didn't. Her and the Darkness Devil point at each other, and the Darkness Devil gets all crumpled up and her finger breaks, but she never uses Bang. And so far as I remember, I don't think Makima uses Bang prior to this moment, which means that the Bang that killed Power ironically ties its roots back to the Gun Devil, and that the American president sacrificing 1 year of everybody's life only gave Makima the Gun Devil abilities. And while that's not a giant reveal or realization, I still think it's pretty cool. Anyways, back to the fight. Denji / Chainsaw Man just got knocked through a building by Bang, and immediately after Chainsaw Man rearranges somebody's living room with its body, Asa and Yoru start to get real introspective about what they just did to their technical children. But mostly just Yoru, because they were Yoru's children, not Asa's children. And thus Yoru begins to look at her hands and says, Tank Devil, Gun Devil, they were both created by war. They fought for me as my kin, as symbols of the horrors of war. And it's at this point that Asa's spectrum rating starts to show itself as she watches this grieving mother get introspective with the fact that she just erased 2 of her children to fight against Chainsaw Man and complete a personal vendetta by not asking Yoru how they are or what they're feeling, but instead diverting the conversation to her wants. As Asa goes on to ask Yoru, killing the Chainsaw Man will help grant Denji's wish. Right? Yeah, I'm sure that's absolutely what Yoru wanted, and hey, maybe it is because it's directed the conversation away from the fact that she's wearing her children as arms. Now, Yoru responds to this by saying, well, that's what Famine said, and at this point that Asa realizes, okay, maybe we do circle back to that incredibly emotional and pivotal moment in Yoru's character, saying, are you really okay with this, Yoru? Turning your own kin into weapons? I mean, these were devils made from the concept of war, so they are essentially your children. And at this point that Yoru, who looks bad as hell in this panel, turns to Asa and says, children are the property of their parents, right? So I guess, and she's not as broken up about the concept of killing the Gun and Tank Devil as we originally anticipated. Now, rather appropriately, this shocks Asa. And also, rather appropriately, this conversation that Yoru and Asa decided to have in the middle of combat gave Denji enough time to pull himself out of the broken in half IKEA couch he landed on and perch on top of the building he was thrown into. However, he does it with such a speed that Yoru is astonished. But her astonishment only lasts so long as she points at Denji once again and says, Chainsaw Man, do you remember me? Did the pain remind you? Did it make you tremble? Did your stomach rumble with desire to eat me? And obviously, Black Chainsaw Man, who doesn't talk, isn't responding to any of these provocations, but Yoru continues, saying, it seems I've made you pretty mad, so come down here and fight me, Chainsaw Man. And in response to this, Chainsaw Man decides to leave. And once again, like so incredibly fast that Yoru isn't able to react in time and has no idea where he went, as she points her finger gun in all directions, and notably only her right hand, mind you, looking for where Chainsaw Man could have gone, only to realize he's nowhere near her. And I believe this scene basically guarantees that the gun devil is offensive and the tank devil is going to be defensive, because if you're trying to scan in all directions, you could fire with both hands, you would point up both hands. We then get a massive pan out shot of Yoru looking around and yelling at Chainsaw Man to reveal himself, something that apparently he doesn't plan on doing anytime soon. Because where's Chainsaw Man? Oh, well, I don't know, just your local blood drive. And there's a girl there holding a give blood sign, chanting give blood to save a life, give blood to save a life. And apparently this really resonates with Chainsaw Man, who's really got a propensity for nervous girls with black hair, because this is the second time that he's pulled up on the place of work of a nervous girl with black hair, and then, well, I guess not trying to take her on a date this time. He just took her sign. Still, he loves mucking up a workday. Now, the girl who's holding the sign and chanting rather appropriately drops the sign and runs away. Now, I will say this is probably the first sensible decision she's made all day, because how do you not hear the buildings being deconstructed manually by people being blown through them 3 blocks away? Now, this could be an indicator that Chainsaw Man is nowhere near Asa and Yoru and jumped miles away, but genuinely, who's to say? Now, after she runs away, the Chainsaw Man decides to pick up the give blood sign and start bobbing it up and down while saying, and I quote, Vam Vaga Vagyagwa. Vam Vaga Vagyagwa, which I'm assuming is the Chainsaw Man's way of saying give blood, save a life, give blood, save a life. But because his teeth are basically needles and he has a chainsaw coming out of his forehead, what we get is Vam Vaga Vagyagwa. Sounds like a mix of Yiddish and Huttese. But don't worry, the rest of the chapter isn't dedicated to Chainsaw Man becoming a philanthropist, because after Chainsaw Man begins to learn about the perils of the world not having enough blood for operations, we cut immediately to the Heartland, also known as Texas. Fun fact, where I was born. And Fujimoto does a really good job of nailing down what most of Texas looks like as we pan in on a smallish house with a big yard and a picket fence. Inside, there's a bald, chubby-ish man sitting at a kitchen counter with a Boston Terrier. Now, I can't necessarily say I've seen a lot of Boston Terriers in Texas, but it's an American-ish dog, so we'll give Fujimoto some slack here. Now, mind you, Chainsaw Man takes place in 1997, so this man who's watching TV in his kitchen on a gigantic TV makes a fair amount of sense for the time period. However, unfortunately, his morning coffee and cartoons gets cut short by the fact that his fingers get cut off. More specifically, his 2 index fingers get cut off. Thus, we then cut to the next page where we see a litany of different Americans all across the country getting their 2 index fingers cut off, paired with a message that approximately 400,000 of the National Pistol Association of America's 4 million members lose their index fingers. So that is to say that all these scenes that we see of Americans all across the country losing their index fingers is because they were some of the 400,000 of the 3.5 million National Pistol Association people who were chosen to lose their index fingers, which means that just about 1 in 10 people in the National Pistol Association lost their index fingers. Now, obviously, this has something to do with the gun devil and the fact that you pull the trigger of a gun with your index finger. As to why the National Pistol Association was chosen over something like the National Rifle Association, I can't really say. But it's this point that the chapter starts to get real interesting, because we see after 400,000 people lose their index fingers that Yoru is pointing towards the sky with hers in an eerily similar pose to that of the Statue of Liberty, who she is shown next to. We then jump to the final page of this chapter, which shows a close-up shot of the Statue of Liberty, and then a close-up shot on Yoru's hand as she bends her index finger. And after Yoru bends her index finger, we see the face of the Statue of Liberty start to crack. Now, there's a lot to take away from this moment, but before we dive into the many things that we could dive into based off the Statue of Liberty and the bending of the index finger, it is important to note here that the reason that Tatsuki Fujimoto centers so many of his stories loosely around America, at least in some way, is because Tatsuki Fujimoto was an American lawyer before he was a mangaka. Yes, Tatsuki Fujimoto was a practicing lawyer in New York and Washington. While he learned how to oil paint and draw manga at a young age, he went to school for law, passed the bar, and served as a lawyer in the United States of America. So whenever you wonder to yourself, why does Tatsuki Fujimoto always bring the story back to America in some way or another, that right there is your answer. The man who wrote Fire Punch was a lawyer. Let that sink in. Honestly, may still be a lawyer. Who knows? But anyways, back to the story and back to America. It seems as though somehow the Statue of Liberty is about to get involved in the battle between the War Devil and Chainsaw Man. How and why? And what does this have to do with the 400,000, I guess technically 800,000 index fingers that were sacrificed to pull this off? Well, it feels important to note that sacrifices in order to strengthen a devil's power is nothing new. However, a devil freely exercising control over 400,000 people's bodies bodies is a bit weird within the confines of the rules of Chainsaw Man. See, we saw that the American president was able to give 1 year of every American's life to the gun devil. Now, so far as Chainsaw Man logic goes, of which there isn't a whole lot, the reason he was able to do this is because he is the president of the United States of America, and therefore the leader of everybody whose life he is technically sacrificing in some way or another. This is similar to what we saw with the Chainsaw Man Church. All of the members of the Chainsaw Man Church, because they signed into contracts to join the Chainsaw Man Church, were able to be turned into chainsaw men and women after the destruction of the Chainsaw Man Church, which was done to stoke the fears of the Chainsaw Man and war. But if you're paying close attention here, you'll realize you'll need one of two things to sacrifice human lives in any capacity as a devil or as somebody making a contract with a devil. And that is control over the people that you're sacrificing or a contract signed. Now, one could argue that Yoru probably shouldn't have either of these things over the members of the National Pistol Association. If Yoru, simply by assimilating with the gun devil, now has control over everybody who likes guns, that'd be kind of broken and also out of line with what we know about the Chainsaw Man universe, as that would mean that Yuji would have control over all lumberjacks or anybody who liked chainsaws, which feels thin and weird. A much more likely explanation for what's going on here is that every member of the National Pistol Association had to sign a contract to join the National Pistol Association, and by signing that contract, kind of like the people who joined the Chainsaw Man Church, they were essentially joining in league with at least the Gun Devil and maybe the War Devil, but most likely the Gun Devil, because the emphasis is still on Yoru's right hand. It's not until Yoru pulls a proverbial trigger that we start to see something happen with the Statue of Liberty. And that is absolutely what's going on with Yoru's hand. She's pulling a trigger. Now, this is unique within the confines of Bang, because usually when somebody uses Bang, be it Yoru or Makima, they don't bend their finger like they're pulling a trigger. There's also no recoil associated with the Bang. I just do it because it's fun. And thus they simply just go bang, and a shot is fired. And thus it's the first time that we've ever seen anything associated with Bang that included the curling of a finger. So what's going on here? Well, while it would be incredibly sick if the Statue of Liberty cracked out of its copper plating and decided to join the battle as America's first mech, I don't think that's what's happening here. See, it's important to note that a big talking point revolving around the Gun Devil up until this moment is that it's not all in one place. America had access to roughly 28% of it, I believe, and it's that 28% that they sacrificed American years to in order to send at Makima. However, because the Gun Devil being sent to Tokyo to battle against Makima was kind of the beginning of the end of Part 1 of Chainsaw Man, we never really knew outside of Aki 47 what happened with the Gun Devil. Now, it makes sense to assume that after Aki 47, that segment of the Gun Devil effectively died. But what do we know about devils? They never actually die. They just go back to hell, and then when they die in hell, they reincarnate on Earth. And thus I think there's a slight possibility that what Yoru is doing here, by bending her finger and sacrificing 800,000 index fingers, is summoning another part of the Gun Devil. And there's a fair amount of evidence to back this up. I mean, we saw the Devil containment facility in the Gulf of Mexico where the Tank Devil was contained, and we saw that the Tank Devil punched a hole in the safe door when Yoru called it. But when we saw the Gun Devil being called, we saw an explosion in the side of a mountain in the SSR, or the Soviet Union. Now, the Soviet Union did hold on to the largest fragment of the Gun Devil in the Chainsaw Man universe, something like 31 or 32%. And thus it would make sense that if you were going to summon a fragment of the Gun Devil, that's the fragment you would want. However, segments of the Gun Devil are still being held by places like China and other devils, which is why Aki was so singularly focused on hunting down devils that had fragments of the Gun Devil so they could exercise those fragments of the Gun Devil slowly but surely, weakening the Gun Devil. But I feel as though it's going to be revealed in chapter 178 is that either the 28% of the Gun Devil that was sent to battle against Makima was returned back to the United States and possibly placed in the Statue of Liberty, or that the Statue of Liberty has always held on to fragments of the Gun Devil, but the Gun Devil was melted down to make the Statue of Liberty itself. Regardless, really, I believe the outcome is going to be that somehow the Gun Devil is tied to the Statue of Liberty. And the reason 800,000 index fingers of pistol-loving individuals had to be sacrificed is very similar to the reasoning behind every American having to give up 1 year of their life to summon and control the Gun Devil, which would only add on to Yoru's already immense amount of strength. Now, there is also a possibility that Yoru is summoning some third devil. However, when you consider the fact that we haven't even seen what the Tank Devil does yet, and the fact that Yoru was already having a complex about erasing the Tank and the Gun Devil from existence by making them into her gauntlets, the erasure of a third entity seems like a bit of a stretch. But there is a possibility, I guess, that something like the Pistol Devil is going to get introduced, but that seems too nuanced for how big of the scale of the battle we're talking about here. Because if we're going to introduce something like the Pistol Devil, then we could introduce the Rifle Devil, and the Long Gun Devil, and the LMG Devil, and it just gets too watered down. On top of this, I don't think the Statue of Liberty is going to be entering into combat. that. Mostly because the battle is currently taking place in Tokyo, and the Statue of Liberty is in Ellis Island in New York. And thus it seems exponentially more likely to me that we're just going to be summoning either another devil or more of the same devils, who just so happen to be in the Statue of Liberty. But I'm curious to hear what you guys thought of this chapter. What do you think lies behind the copper facade of the Statue of Liberty? Do you think it's the gun devil? Do you think it's the tank devil? Do you think it's the pistol devil? What do you think? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go. Thank God I still have my index fingers. Mwah.